I'm Felicia Cardenas, and I'm 29 years old. 3 weeks ago, my father stood in our living room, pointed a finger at my face, called me a worthless disappointment, and threw me out of his house. In his eyes, my job as a psychiatric nurse, making $58,200 a year, meant I didn't deserve a seat at the Cardenas family table. Go live on the streets with your patients, he had snarled. I didn't argue. I just picked up my bag and walked out. But tonight, exactly 3 weeks later, I showed up at the grand ballroom of the Valentine Hotel. It was the night of his firm's massive client appreciation gala, with 180 of his wealthiest clients in attendance. The moment my father saw me, the color drained from his face. He marched over, grabbed my arm, dragged me into the lobby, and hissed, "I told you never to show your face here! You are embarrassing me!" A few passing guests turned to look. But what my father didn't know was that the quiet, unassuming man standing next to me in a plain t-shirt, Daniel, had signed an $85 million contract just this morning with the CEO sitting at VIP Table 1. And in the next 4 minutes, the truth was about to completely dismantle everything my father ever believed about success. My parents live at 47 Pembroke Lane, a gated community where homes start at $1.2 million. The security gate alone cost $18,000. In the driveway sat my mother's leased white Mercedes GLE and my father's leased black S-Class, costing them over $2,000 a month combined. Inside, every single detail screamed luxury: marble countertops, custom Italian furniture, and a climate-controlled wine cellar that cost more than half my annual salary. In wealth management, image is everything. My father always said, if you don't look successful, people won't trust you with their money. Rafael Cardenas, 58, CEO of Cardenas Wealth Partners. That was the title on his gold-embossed business card. What the card didn't say was that his firm was basically a glorified 4-person shop, surviving on commissions from selling mutual funds to retirees. 85% of that beautiful house was mortgaged. The luxury cars were leased. Even his beloved country club membership was funded by a business line of credit. And that $87,000 credit card was completely maxed out. Nobody was supposed to know. I only found out by accident last Thanksgiving. I had come home early to help prep dinner, and my mother's laptop was open on the kitchen island. A notification from Bank of America was flashing on the screen. Your home equity line of credit is 47 days past due. Balance owed $127,340. I only stared at it for 3 seconds before my stare rushed in, slammed the laptop shut, and looked at me with pure panic. "Felicia," she whispered, "that's private." I didn't ask questions, but I started noticing things. The way my father's jaw clenched whenever the mail arrived, and how my mother began buying generic groceries but transferring them into expensive brand-name jars. The Cardenas family wasn't wealthy. We were drowning. My father's office was a 1,200-square-foot space on the 3rd floor of the Morrison building. He had 3 other advisors working for him. The lobby featured faux leather chairs and plastic plants, but he always boasted to clients that they managed $24 million in assets. Highly exclusive, he called it. The reality? Over the past 18 months, their assets under management had plummeted to 18.7 million. My 25-year-old sister, Bianca, was listed as a junior wealth advisor, but she mostly just answered phones and scheduled calendar invites. They had lost 3 major clients in the last quarter alone. Dad is losing clients, Bianca had whispered to me at a family dinner back in March. He's incredibly stressed. I didn't say anything. In my family, showing concern was a sign of weakness. It meant you weren't tough or ambitious enough to carry the Cardinus name. The annual Client Appreciation Gala was my father's ultimate gamble. Every May, he hosted a black tie event to impress existing clients and reel in new ones. Last year's dinner cost $78,000. This year, he pushed the budget to $95,000, putting it all on the business credit card that was already suffocating them. He booked the Valentine Hotel, complete with crystal chandeliers, a live string quartet, an open bar, and a French fusion menu. It's an investment, my mother told me when I questioned the cost. We just need to sign one new high net worth client, and it pays for itself. The gold-foiled invitations alone cost $4,800. The deposit for the hotel was $32,000. Then I saw the email. My father had sent it to Bianca but accidentally copied me. Subject, guest list, final. Keep Felicia away from the dinner. She makes us look poor. I stared at that single line for a long time. Then I closed my laptop and didn't reply. I work in the inpatient psychiatric unit at Atrium Health. It's a 16-bed facility for people in acute crisis, patients struggling with severe clinical depression, schizophrenia, or trauma. My shifts run from 7 to 7, 12 hours, sometimes longer. My salary is $58,200. To get here, I spent 4 years earning my nursing degree at Penn, followed by specialized psychiatric training. On Tuesday, a 34-year-old mother of 2 was admitted. She had been stable for 6 months, but lost her job, couldn't afford her medication, and hit rock bottom. I sat with her for 4 hours. Not because I had to, but because she needed someone to just listen. You're the only person who has treated me like a human being, she told me. When I finally got home at 8:15 that night, I had 3 missed calls from my mother. I didn't call back. At Thanksgiving dinner last November, 12 people gathered around 2 tables. The main table in the dining room sat 8. My parents, Bianca, the Hendersons, potential clients worth nearly $2 million, and 2 other VIPs. 18 feet away, at a small table in the corner of the kitchen, sat 4 people, me, Uncle George, and my 2 young cousins. I was sitting on a plastic folding chair. From the kitchen, I could hear my father's booming voice carrying across the house. Bianca just secured a $1.2 million account. The client inherited the funds and trusted Bianca completely to manage them. He went on and on about Bianca for 8 solid minutes. Near the end of the meal, Mrs. Henderson asked, "Raphael, don't you have another daughter?" "Oh yes, Felicia," my father replied, his voice completely flat. "She's a nurse. No elaboration, no pride. Just, she's a nurse." I put my fork down. I wasn't hungry anymore, and nobody noticed. In March, I helped save a patient's life. A 19-year-old college freshman was admitted for severe anxiety. During our assessment, I noticed inconsistencies in his story, the way he avoided eye contact when talking about his dorm, and how he kept rubbing his left wrist. I took him aside, asked the right questions, and discovered he had been hoarding medication for weeks, planning to end his life that Friday. We intervened immediately and got him the critical care he needed. Today, he's alive, attending community college, and working part-time. I called my father to tell him, maybe I just wanted him to be proud of me. The call lasted 45 seconds. That's nice, Felicia, he said. By the way, did Uncle George call you about his retirement account? It was 11:20 in the morning, and I was eating lunch in the break room. I remember looking at the clock on the wall and realizing my father could only tolerate listening to me talk about my career for exactly 4 seconds. My father had used his connections to help get me into Penn's nursing program, even donating $15,000 to boost my chances. He expected me to go into healthcare consulting, hospital administration, or marry someone wealthy. Instead, I chose hands-on psychiatric care. You wasted an Ivy League network for this? He demanded when I told him my plans. In 2017, he skipped my graduation for a golf tournament, calling it an essential networking event. After that, I stopped asking him to show up for my milestones. 14 months ago, I was sitting alone at a French bakery on a Saturday afternoon, reading through patient notes. Daniel was at the next table, reading a book about the history of psychiatric care in America. Great book, I said. He looked up and smiled. Most people don't pay attention to this stuff. We ended up talking for 2 hours about the gaps in the mental health system, how insurance companies deny psychiatric coverage, and the cycle of patients stuck in emergency rooms with nowhere to go. You really care about this, he noted. By 5:40, he asked for my number. I hesitated, used to people losing interest the moment they heard what I did for a living. But Daniel just smiled and said, I'm just a guy who rides a bike. I gave him my number. Daniel lived in a tiny 640 square foot studio apartment. His rent was $1,100, utilities included. He rode an old Schwinn bicycle to work, packed his lunch in Tupperware, and wore plain t-shirts with no brand logos. His jeans were 3 years old. I don't need much, he told me once. The more stuff you own, the more complicated life gets. When I asked what he did, he said he worked at a tech startup, then quickly changed the subject. I didn't push. Everyone in Charlotte seemed to be working at a startup, and most of them went under anyway. One night at 8:40, I dropped by his apartment unannounced. He was on a video call. His laptop was an old 2019 Dell, but the people on the screen were wearing high-end suits, sitting in modern offices with floor-to-ceiling windows. Through his earbuds, I caught snippets of the conversation. Daniel, the board wants to move forward. $85 million is already on the table. Regulatory approvals should align with the acquisition terms. Daniel saw me at the door and quickly shut his laptop. Hey, he said, taking out his earbuds. Sorry, just boring business stuff. Is $85 million boring? I teased. It sounds more exciting than it is, he laughed. I didn't ask further, but that number stuck with me. A startup worth $85 million? For Easter brunch on April 9th, my mother chose a budget-friendly cafeteria. The bill for 7 people came to $127, and my father insisted on splitting it. Daniel wore a simple button-down shirt and arrived in an Uber. When my father asked what he did, Daniel replied, "I run a small health tech company." "Oh," my father said, making no effort to hide his disappointment. "That's nice." 15 minutes later, my father excused himself to greet someone across the room and never came back to our table. I overheard my mother whispering to Bianca, "I can't believe she's dating a startup guy. He probably makes 60 grand a year." Bianca just laughed. After brunch, my father sent me a text. "You can do better than this." I didn't reply. On December 16th, my parents hosted their annual holiday party for 90 guests, clients, prospects, and country club friends. I only found out through Bianca's Instagram stories. She was wearing a $2,800 designer gown, posing next to a 12-foot Christmas tree in our living room. The caption read, "Best holiday party ever." I texted my mother, "Was I not invited?" 2 days later, she replied, "It was strictly a business event." That same night, I was working a 12-hour night shift, caring for 16 patients, including 2 on high-risk suicide watch. One patient kept trying to pull out her IV because she believed it was poison. During my 11 o'clock break, I scrolled through Instagram and saw photos of the party's $4,200 catering spread and champagne fountain. I put my phone away and went back to work. On my 29th birthday in February, my father called at 10:15 in the morning. "Happy birthday, Felicia. How's work?" "Great. I have to run." Client on the other line. I checked the call log later. It lasted 47 seconds. No card, no gift, no follow-up text. Bianca sent me a $25 Starbucks card. My father sent nothing. On March 12th, during a family dinner, my father spent 20 minutes talking about Bianca's latest big win, signing an $800,000 client. In reality, the client was a friend of my father's who had reached out directly. Bianca had simply answered the phone. "See?" my father said, gesturing with his fork. "That's ambition. That's building something." He looked at me. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" I set my knife down. "What am I building then?" He didn't answer. I asked again. "Dad, what am I building?" Silence. My mother quickly changed the subject. On April 18th, Bianca texted me a photo of her gold-foiled invitation to the annual gala, addressed to her and a guest. Her text read, "Got my invite. Did yours get lost?" She knew exactly what she was doing. I texted my mother, "Am I invited to the gala?" 4 hours later, she replied, "This event is for clients and family members who contribute to the family business." I stared at the message. "Family members who contribute." I wrote back, "Good to know I'm not considered family." No reply. On April 20th, I sat in Daniel's apartment and cried. I wasn't proud of it, but the exclusion hurt. "They don't want me there," I sobbed. "I don't fit their image." Daniel listened quietly. Then he asked, "Do you want to go? They made it clear I'm not invited." "That's not what I asked," he said, looking at me. "Do you want to go?" I didn't know what to say. Daniel opened his laptop, navigated to the event page, and bought 2 tickets at $300 each. "Daniel, don't do this," I pleaded. "You deserve to be in that room," he said. "If they won't recognize that, I'll make sure everyone else does. Trust me." 3 days before the gala, we were sitting on Daniel's balcony, watching the sunset over the Charlotte skyline. You've spent your whole life making room for them, Daniel said. It's time they made room for you. What if they throw me out? Then we leave together, he replied. But not before they acknowledge you. They think you're lesser because you save lives instead of managing money. That's their failure, not yours. The next day, I bought a navy dress on sale at Loft for $89. Bianca had posted an Instagram video of her fitting for a $2,800 Vera Wang gown. My entire outfit cost $162. The dress, $45 shoes, and a $28 haircut. Bianca's total exceeded $3,100. The night before the event, I looked in the mirror, feeling out of place. A coworker texted me. "Are you sure you want to be careful?" I didn't reply. On the morning of the event, I received an email from my mother. Subject: About Saturday. Felicia, I heard you bought tickets. Please reconsider. This is a crucial night for your father, and your presence will only create tension. Let's do lunch next week instead. No sign-off, no warmth. Just a polite request to disappear. I stared at it for 10 minutes, then closed it without replying. The decision was made. At 6:45 on Saturday night, Daniel and I took a $24 Uber to the Valentine Hotel. The red carpet was rolled out, and a photographer was stationed by the entrance. Inside, the grand ballroom was stunning, featuring bone china, a live string quartet, playing Vivaldi, and elaborate ice sculptures. At table 1, closest to the stage, sat Gregory Ashton, the CEO of Premier Health Systems, along with Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sarah Chen. Table 16 in the far corner was empty, with no name cards on it. As Daniel and I stood near the entrance, my heart was racing. Then, Bianca saw me. Her jaw dropped, and she immediately ran across the room to find our father. He was speaking with some prospective clients at table 3. Bianca whispered in his ear, and though I couldn't hear her, I could read her lips. "She's here with that guy." My father turned, lockjawed, and stared at me across the room. His face flushed deep red as he walked directly toward us. He didn't stop to talk. He grabbed my arm and dragged me out into the lobby, where dozens of hotel guests were milling about. "What are you doing here?" he hissed. "I didn't invite you. I bought tickets," I said. "I have every right to be here." "You're making a mockery of my business," he spat. "I'm just attending a dinner." "No!" his voice rose. "You are embarrassing me." People began to stare. My mother rushed out of the ballroom. "Raphael, not here. Everyone is watching." "I don't care," he snapped. "She needs to leave right now." I stood my ground. Daniel remained quiet, hands in his pockets. My father glared at him. "Who is this? This is my event. You don't belong here." The music from the string quartet suddenly stopped, leaving a sudden quiet in the air. Guests began gathering near the lobby doors. My mother tried to pull him back, but he brushed her off. Daniel stood completely calm. I could feel dozens of eyes on us as my father stepped closer. Then, he said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "You are embarrassing me in front of my clients. You contribute nothing to this family, and you don't belong here. Go back to your little hospital job and stop pretending you belong in this world." Total silence fell over the lobby. A woman holding a glass of champagne froze and guests stopped talking. My father grabbed my arm, his grip tight, and pushed me toward the exit doors. I didn't fight back. I just walked. At the door, I turned around. Daniel hadn't followed. He was still standing in the lobby, looking at me. He gave me a single, reassuring nod. I stepped outside into the cool night air. My arm throbbed where his fingers had dug into my skin. Inside, I could hear muffled voices, and I wanted nothing more than to call an Uber and go home. But I waited. Inside, my father walked back into the ballroom, forced a smile, and clapped his hands. "Sorry about that, everyone," he announced. "Just some family drama." Nobody laughed. The silence stretched on for several agonizing seconds. Then, Gregory Ashton stood up. The CEO of Premier Health Systems didn't look at my father. He looked past him, straight at Daniel, his eyes wide with surprise. Gregory walked slowly into the lobby, stopping a few feet from Daniel. "Raphael," Gregory said, turning to my father. "Is that Daniel Whitmore?" His voice carried clearly in the quiet room. My father blinked. "Who? That's just my daughter's boyfriend." Gregory shook his head. "Daniel Whitmore," he repeated. "Of Mindbridge Health?" My father looked entirely lost. "Mindbridge? What?" Dr. Sarah Chen stood up from table 1 and walked over, her eyes bright. "Wait," she said. "That's Daniel from our meeting this morning." Daniel offered a polite smile. "Hello, Dr. Chen." Sarah turned to my father. "Raphael, that is Daniel Whitmore." "The Daniel Whitmore. We literally just had a meeting with him this morning at Premier Health headquarters." My father stared blankly. "A meeting about a major telehealth partnership," Dr. Chen's voice echoed. "Worth $85 million. The entire room went dead silent. Gregory took a step toward my father, his expression turning incredibly cold. "Raphael," Gregory asked slowly, "did you just throw Daniel Whitmore's fiancée out of your dinner?" My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "The CEO of a multi-billion-dollar public company," Gregory added, his voice like ice. "That Daniel Whitmore." My father's gaze darted between Daniel, Gregory, and Sarah. His hands began to visibly shake. In the crowd, someone quietly pulled out their phone. Daniel kept his hands in his pockets as he walked calmly back into the ballroom. Every eye in the room followed his movement. Gregory gestured toward him, addressing the crowd. "Everyone, this is Daniel Whitmore, the founder and CEO of Mindbridge Health." A woman at table 7 gasped. "Mindbridge Health," Gregory continued, "is the digital healthcare platform that just went public last month." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Several guests immediately pulled out their phones, searching for Mindbridge Health IPO. Standing near the glass doors, I knew exactly what they were seeing on their screens. The company had gone public just 24 days ago with a valuation of $3.8 billion. The woman at table 7 looked up from her phone, completely pale. $3.8 billion? My father stood frozen, sweat breaking out on his forehead. My mother gripped the back of her chair, her knuckles turning white, while Bianca sat heavily in her seat. Daniel didn't say a word. He just stood there in his simple blazer and plain t-shirt, entirely unbothered. "May I say a few words?" Daniel finally spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it instantly silenced the entire room. He looked around, then let his gaze settle directly on my father. "I came here tonight because Felicia deserves to be in this room." Silence hung heavy in the air. She is a psychiatric nurse, Daniel said, his voice steady. And she is one of the finest nurses I have ever met. My father's jaw tightened. She saves lives every single day, Daniel continued. And she is the exact reason I built MindBridge Health. Gregory nodded in agreement, while Dr. Chen smiled warmly. My father looked as if he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. Most people don't understand what psychiatric nurses actually do, Daniel said, glancing coldly at my father. They only see numbers, salaries, and titles. They miss the real value. A woman at table 9 quietly wiped a tear from her eye. Felicia works 12-hour shifts. Sometimes longer, Daniel said. She sits with people who have lost all hope, and she helps them find it again, one patient at a time. That is the real work, and that is what actually matters. The silence in the room was absolute. Dr. Sarah Chen stepped forward, looking directly at my father. I think everyone should know something, she said. Just this morning, Daniel had a meeting with us. With Gregory and myself. Gregory nodded in agreement. Sarah smiled. We just finalized an $85 million partnership. MindBridge Health is going to integrate their platform across all 7 of our hospitals in North Carolina. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. This partnership will serve 400,000 patients, Sarah continued. It's going to expand access to mental health services in a way we've never seen before. She looked at Daniel, her eyes full of respect. His vision is extraordinary. Someone in the back of the room couldn't help but whisper, so, what is he worth now? Gregory answered the question. Following the IPO, Daniel holds a 22% stake in MindBridge Health. At the current valuation, that's roughly $836 million. Another loud gasp echoed through the room. And his annual income from stock vesting, Gregory continued, pausing to lock eyes with my father, is over $15 million. To be precise, it's $15.2 million. There was another pause. That is more than half of your entire $24 million in managed assets, Raphael. My father's face turned an ash-gray color. Bianca buried her head in her hands. My mother looked unsteady on her feet, as if she might collapse at any moment. Daniel spoke again. I am incredibly fortunate to work alongside people who care about mental health as deeply as Felicia does. He began listing a few names. Our advisory board includes a former U.S. Surgeon General, the current director of the National Institute of Mental Health, and the deans of 3 top medical schools. He offered a small, humble smile. They didn't join us for the money. They joined because this work is vital. Everyone stared at him in awe. My father stood completely isolated in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by 180 clients who had just learned the truth. The man in the cheap t-shirt was worth more than everyone in that room combined. And my father had just thrown his fiancée out like trash. The event's MC walked over to Daniel with a microphone. Would you like to say a few words on stage? Daniel looked at the microphone, then at the elevated stage where the string quartet had been playing. I didn't plan on speaking tonight, he said, his voice carrying through the speakers. But I think there are some things that need to be said. He walked up to the stage, and a spotlight found him. 180 people held their breath. My father looked like he wanted to rush the stage to stop him. I could see the panic in his eyes. But Gregory Ashton stood right there, arms crossed, staring him down. My father remained frozen in place. Felicia Cardenas earns $58,200 a year, Daniel said into the microphone, letting the number hang in the air. She works 12-hour shifts in a psychiatric ward, managing crises, de-escalating patients, administering medication. She sees people in their darkest moments. Schizophrenia, acute distress, severe depression. He paused. She doesn't manage money. She manages hope. The woman at table 9 wiped her eyes again. Last year, a 19-year-old boy was admitted to her ward. He was in deep distress and had a plan to end his life. Felicia sat with him for 6 hours. She talked to him, kept him safe, and got him into the intensive care unit. Daniel looked out at the crowd. That kid is alive today because of her. He is attending community college, working part-time, and building a life. Silence fell over the room. You can't measure that kind of value in dollars, Daniel said firmly. But if you had to, it's worth more than any investment portfolio in this room. Several people in the crowd nodded in agreement. My father remained frozen. I met Felicia 14 months ago, Daniel said, his tone softening. She told me about the gaps in the mental health system. She told me about patients stuck in emergency rooms, about insurance companies denying coverage, and about families who simply couldn't afford care. He smiled. She showed me what was broken and what was worth fixing. He turned his head toward the glass doors of the lobby, looking right at me. Mindbridge exists because Felicia showed me that mental health care isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. And the people who provide that care, nurses like her, deserve respect, not dismissal. Applause started, low at first, and then built into a thunderous ovation. My father didn't clap. Daniel's expression hardened as he looked directly at him. Raphael. My father flinched. You said Felicia contributes nothing to this family. You were wrong. The room quieted down again. The way you treated her tonight, and the way you've treated her for years, is inexcusable, Daniel said, his voice calm but absolute. You owe her an apology, not in private, right here, right now. My father's face flushed a deep red, a vein throbbing on his forehead. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. 12 seconds of agonizing silence passed. He said nothing. Daniel waited, then nodded. I thought so. He handed the microphone back to the MC and walked off the stage to another round of applause. Hundreds of people were clapping for him. My father stood in the center of the room, completely stripped of his dignity, in front of all his clients. Daniel took the microphone one last time. Before I leave, he said, I want to make one announcement. The room fell quiet. Mindbridge Health is launching a new initiative tonight. We are calling it the Cardenas Mental Health Initiative. My father snapped his head up, his eyes wide. We are funding $10.5 million to improve mental health services in the Charlotte area. A wave of whispers washed over the room. My father's expression shifted. For a split second, a flicker of hope appeared in his eyes. He was likely wondering if this was about him, if using the family name meant he had won some kind of recognition. He was completely wrong. $8.5 million of that funding, Daniel said. will go toward establishing a 24-hour mental health crisis center at Atrium Health, the hospital where Felicia works. The guests leaned in to listen. The center will feature 40 beds and operate 24/7. It will provide immediate stabilization and psychiatric care, with no insurance barriers and no waiting lists, Dr. Sarah Chen smiled and nodded. This center will serve 12,000 patients a year, Daniel continued. It will reduce mental health emergency room visits by 40%. It will save lives. He paused. And the clinical director of the Cardenas Mental Health Crisis Center will be Felicia Cardenas. The room erupted in applause. My father stood there like an empty shell. The remaining $2 million, Daniel said as the applause quieted down, will establish a nursing scholarship fund. More applause followed. It will fund 15 students a year at $25,000 each, covering tuition and living expenses for students from underrepresented communities. He looked out at the crowd. Because we need more people like Felicia. We need people who actually care. A man at table 14 stood up and clapped loudly. Then another stood, and soon half the ballroom was on its feet. My father didn't move. He didn't clap. He just stood there like a ghost. Daniel turned toward the lobby, looking at the glass doors. Felicia, he said into the microphone, if you can hear me, would you come back inside? I heard my name through the glass. I had been standing in the cold for 14 minutes, watching the shadows move inside. And now, they were calling me back. I took a deep breath, pushed open the heavy glass doors, and walked in. 180 people turned to look at me. But this time there was no pity, no judgment, and no scrutiny. They looked at me with respect. Daniel reached out his hand. I walked toward the stage, my hand shaking. He took it and gave it a reassuring squeeze. This is your moment. At 7:29, I stood on stage holding the microphone. 180 pairs of eyes were on me. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. 5 seconds of silence passed, and I could hear my heart hammering in my chest. Then, I spoke. I didn't prepare a speech. A few people offered warm, understanding smiles. My mind flashed through my patients, the long nights, the endless battles with insurance companies, and the nights I was too exhausted to even move. 2 years ago, I said, my voice shaky but gaining strength. A 19-year-old boy was admitted to my ward. He told me he was just there for anxiety, but I knew something was wrong. He wouldn't look at me, and he kept touching his left wrist. I paused. I took him aside, asked him the right questions, and found out he had been hoarding medication to end his life that Friday. The silence was absolute. We got him into the ICU and saved his life. Today, 2 years later, he is alive, attending community college, and working part-time at a bookstore. I looked out at the crowd. That is worth more than any investment portfolio. That is a human life. Now, several people were crying, not just the woman at table 9. I looked at my father. He stood near table 3, pale and sweating. Dad, I said. He flinched. I am not going to apologize for who I am. I'm not going to apologize for choosing a career that helps people, for not making as much money as you wanted, or for not fitting your definition of success. I took a deep breath. And until you learn to respect what I do, I will not be attending any family events. You could hear a pin drop. I deserve better, I said, and I'm done waiting for you to realize it. I set the microphone down and walked off the stage. The applause was deafening. Over 100 people cheered for me. I didn't look back at my father. I walked straight to Daniel. He put his arm around my shoulder, and we walked out together. At 11:40 that night, my phone rang. It was my father. I didn't answer. At 1:15 in the morning, he called again. I didn't answer. At 2:03, a third call. I turned my phone face down on the table. At 2:47, he left a voicemail. Felicia, pick up. This is important. We need to talk. Call me back. No, I'm sorry. No, I was wrong. Just call me back. I deleted the voicemail and blocked his number. The next morning at 8:45, I woke up to an email from my mother. Subject: moving forward. Felicia, your father is under an immense amount of stress right now. I know last night was difficult, but I think we can put this behind us and move forward. Perhaps we can do lunch this week. I'd love to discuss that initiative Daniel mentioned. It's an incredible opportunity. Maybe Daniel would be interested in having the family firm handle the financial planning for the project. It would be a wonderful way to collaborate as a family. Let's not let emotions get in the way of business. Love, Mom. 340 words. Calculating, cold, and entirely unapologetic. I read it twice, then replied with 3 words. No, thank you. On May 8th at 10:20 in the morning, Bianca sent me a text. Felicia, I am so sorry. I should have stood up for you. I was just too afraid of Dad, but you were right. You've always been the strongest one. Can we talk? I stared at the message. It was the first time Bianca had ever admitted our father was wrong. I replied, I need some time. She wrote back immediately, I understand. Whenever you're ready, I'm here. I didn't reply further. On May 10th at 7:15 in the evening, I finished my shift and walked out to the parking lot. My father was leaning against his leased Mercedes. He had been waiting there for 40 minutes. Felicia, he said quickly as soon as he saw me. Please, just 5 minutes. I stopped 20 feet away. Not here, not now. I just want to talk. You had 29 years to talk to me, I said. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away. He didn't follow. Between May 7th and May 21st, 14 major clients ended their contracts with Cardenas Wealth Partners. The firm's managed assets plummeted from $24 million to $17.3 million. $6.7 million. Gone in an instant. Gregory Ashton moved his $2.3 million portfolio to a competitor. He sent my father an email, which Bianca later forwarded to me. Raphael, I cannot work with a financial advisor who treats his own family the way you treated Felicia. I am moving my accounts elsewhere. My father had lost his biggest client. On June 1st, my father announced the closure of the South Park office. An internal memo called it a restructuring for efficiency. But Bianca told me the truth. They could no longer afford the $4,200 monthly rent. 2 advisors were laid off. The firm was slowly failing. Charlotte's business community is small, and news travels fast. By mid-June, my father was quietly uninvited from 2 major networking events, a Chamber of Commerce dinner, and a Rotary Club fundraiser. Both organizations sent polite emails stating their venues had reached capacity. Uncle George told me what people were saying. Did you hear about Rafael Cardenas? Threw his own daughter out of a gala, only to find out her fiancé is a billionaire. The Cardenas name, the image my father spent his life building, was tarnished. On November 3rd at 7:40 in the evening, Uncle George called me. Felicia, he said, I need to apologize. I hadn't spoken to him since May. I should have spoken up on Thanksgiving, he said, his voice cracking. When your father sat you at that tiny kitchen table, I should have stood up for you. I was a coward, and you deserved better from all of us. I didn't know what to say. I'm sorry, he said again. We talked for 45 minutes about family dynamics and how my father had learned his harsh, distant behavior from my grandfather. Generational trauma, passed down like an illness. It doesn't excuse what he did, George said, but it explains where it comes from. He invited Daniel and me to dinner, and we met at a seafood restaurant on November 10th. George insisted on paying the $87 bill. He told us stories of my father's childhood, describing my grandfather as a harsh, demanding man who was never satisfied. Your dad is a broken man, too, George sighed. But it's not my responsibility to fix him, I said quietly. I asked if my father had changed at all. George shook his head. Not yet, but maybe one day. I nodded, but I wasn't going to hold my breath. Daniel and I started couples counseling in September, and I began individual therapy with Dr. Lisa Park. The sessions cost $150 each, with insurance covering 80%. We went 8 times between September and November. I learned to set boundaries, to recognize trauma, and to accept that healing doesn't require reconciliation. Healing just means finding peace. You don't need your father's approval to find peace, Felicia, Dr. Park told me. One night, I wrote my father a 4-page letter, filling it with everything I had ever wanted to say. I didn't mail it. I just needed to get the words out. I burned the pages in the kitchen sink of Daniel's apartment, watching them turn to ash, and felt a profound sense of relief. 8 months after the gala, on December 14th, the Cardenas Mental Health Crisis Center celebrated its grand opening. 200 guests attended, including hospital staff, community leaders, and local media. The mayor gave a speech, calling the center a perfect blend of empathy and innovation. I stood at a small podium wearing sandcrubs and my new name tag, which read, Clinical Director. Daniel stood beside me in a simple suit, looking like the same grounded guy I had always known. I looked at the plaque on the wall. The Cardenas Mental Health Initiative, founded by Daniel Whitmore and Felicia Cardenas. My father's name was on it because it used the family surname, but this was my legacy, and it had nothing to do with him. During our first week, we treated 127 patients. Our 40 beds reached full capacity by the 3rd day. We offered 24-hour crisis intervention and immediate psychiatric care with no insurance barriers. Our staff of 18, nurses, therapists, and social workers was fully dedicated. I worked 60 hours that week, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. On the 4th day, a 45-year-old man was admitted in severe distress, experiencing intense hallucinations. We stabilized him within 3 days. When he was discharged, he shook my hand and said, "Thank you. You saved my life." I smiled and replied, "That's exactly why we're here." Back in November, I had sent my father a formal invitation to the opening through Uncle George. I didn't ask for an RSVP or call to follow up. On December 14th, I scanned the crowd of 200 people. My father wasn't there. After the ceremony, Uncle George found me. "I'm sorry," he said. I tried to convince him to come. I nodded. "I know." Surprisingly, I felt fine. I no longer needed him to be there. Once the crowd cleared, I stood alone outside the building, looking at the stainless steel plaque mounted by the entrance. Cardina's Mental Health Initiative, established 2023. Founded by Daniel Whitmore and Felicia Cardenas. Dedicated to those who heal. I stared at it for a long time. My father's name was right there, but the legacy no longer belonged to him. Daniel walked up behind me and wrapped his arms around my shoulders. "You did it," he whispered. I shook my head. "We did it." A photographer from the Charlotte Observer took our picture, and it appeared in the paper the next day. The two of us smiling in front of the center we had built together. The caption read, "Local nurse and tech CEO partner to open $10.5 million mental health center." The article didn't mention my father at all, and I was entirely at peace with that. Because now, this was my life, and my story to write. My name is Carmel Williams, and I'm 31 years old. That Christmas, I came home to find the house completely empty, except for my grandfather sitting in his rocking chair. On the kitchen table sat a note from my father, written in his familiar, decisive handwriting. "We went to Europe with your brother. You stay and look after grandfather. He needs you." I didn't feel sad or angry. I was used to being treated this way. But I never imagined that this Christmas would bring such an extraordinary gift. My grandfather slowly opened his eyes, looked up from his rocking chair and asked, "Are we ready to begin?" It wasn't until they returned from Europe and my grandfather spoke at a family meeting that left them screaming in anger that I truly understood what he meant. To understand how we got there, I need to take you back to where it all began. I was 12 years old when I first learned our family's unspoken rules. I had brought home my report card from High Point Middle School. All A's, perfect attendance, and a spot on the principal's list. My father, Donald, glanced at it for less than 3 seconds before turning to my 9-year-old brother, Todd. "Todd got a B+ in math," Donald said. "That is very impressive for a boy his age." Todd's report card actually had 2 C's and a D in English, but Donald just smiled and patted his shoulder. "Keep up the good work, son." I stood there holding my straight-A report card. Donald gave me a passing glance. "Good job, Carmel. Go help your mother with dinner." That was the moment I realized that in our family, hard work meant nothing, and gender determined everything. Fast forward to Thanksgiving in 2023. Donald owned Wittenberg Auto Parts, a successful chain of 5 stores in Tennessee, generating about $1.6 million a year. He had built the business from scratch. That year, he transformed the flagship showroom into a party venue for 38 guests, complete with catering and an open bar. Donald tapped his glass to get everyone's attention. "I'd like to propose a toast." The room fell silent. To the future of Wittenberg Auto Parts. My son will carry our family name forward. Men build empires and women support them. I'm proud of both my children, but Todd is the one who will take over the business. The room applauded warmly, and Todd stood up to shake hands, looking incredibly pleased. I sat at the far end of the table, my food untouched. My mother, Carolyn, leaned in and whispered, "Aren't you going to congratulate your brother?" I looked at her. Congratulate him for what? Dad just handed him a business he didn't work a single day for. She frowned. Don't be bitter, Carmel. It doesn't look good on you. I stood up and walked over to the main table. The smile faded from Donald's face as I approached. Dad, I said, I'd like to discuss joining the company. I have my nursing degree, but I've been studying business operations. I believe I could really help. Donald laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle, it was a loud, dismissive laugh. Sweetheart, he said, you're a nurse, and that's wonderful. But this business requires a man's touch. You'll get married, and your husband will take care of you. Todd is the future of this family. 38 pairs of eyes stared at me, and not a single person spoke up. I turned around, walked out of the venue, and drove back to Nashville that night. The next morning, Todd texted, "Why did you leave early last night?" Dad was just joking. Todd knew he wasn't joking. On August 12, 2024, at 7:40 in the evening, my phone rang. It was Donald. Carmel, Todd is buying a house. A $65,000 down payment for a lovely home in Maple Ridge. He's a bit short on the funds, so the family is chipping in. I was on shift in the ICU at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, exhausted after helping stabilize a critical patient. That's great, I said. Congratulations to him. We are putting together $22,000 for him, Donald said in a tone that left no room for discussion. Your share is $7,000. I was stunned. He hadn't even asked if I was able to help. This isn't a request, Donald continued. Todd is family, and family helps each other. Transfer the money by Friday. I'll send you his account details. Dad, I'm saving up for my own. Carmel, this is not up for discussion, he said, and hung up. 2 minutes later, the text arrived with Todd's bank details. I stared at the screen. As an ICU nurse, I made $52,000 a year. I had spent 3 years saving for a down payment on my own home, and my account held exactly $14,800. Giving up $7,000 meant delaying my plans by at least 8 months. But I knew what would happen if I refused. Donald would call to yell, Carolyn would guilt-trip me, and Todd would text asking why I didn't want to support him. They would make me the family villain. So, on August 15th, I transferred the $7,000. Todd never sent a thank you text or even confirmed he received it. 2 weeks later, I saw a photo on Facebook of Todd standing in front of his new home. The caption read, "So grateful for a supportive family." He didn't tag me. On October 24th at 10:30 at night, Donald called again. Carmel, we need to talk about Eugene. Eugene was my 82-year-old grandfather, who still lived alone in our family's old home. What about him? I asked. He's getting older, Donald said. We need to start planning for his estate, his will, and his long-term care. He's in good health, I noted. He doesn't need. Listen, Donald interrupted. I know you're busy with your nursing career and don't have time for family complications. So, I'm offering you an easy way out. I sat on the edge of my bed. What do you mean? Sign a waiver relinquishing any claim to Eugene's estate, Donald said coldly. In exchange, I'll give you $18,000 in cash right now. You can use it for a vacation, a car, whatever you like. You don't need the inheritance. You have a stable job. A cold feeling washed over me. You want me to sign away my inheritance for $18,000? It's a fair offer, Donald said. Eugene doesn't have much anyway. This way, you avoid lawyers, probate, and family arguments, simple and clean. And if I say no, his tone sharpened, then you are choosing to make things difficult for everyone. I took a deep breath. No. The line went silent. You'll regret this, Donald said and hung up. I sat there with my hands shaking for 10 minutes. Then, I opened my laptop, created a new folder, and labeled it Documentation. I started saving everything. Every call log, every text, every interaction. As an ICU nurse, I was trained to document everything thoroughly, and I was about to apply that exact training to my own family. On December 18, 2024, at 9:15 in the morning, I was working my shift in the ICU. My phone buzzed with a call from Donald. I stepped into the hallway to answer. Hello? Carmel. We're going to Europe for Christmas, he said, bypassing any greeting. Okay, I replied. We leave on December 23rd. You'll need to stay at the house with Eugene. He needs someone to look after him. I blinked. You didn't ask if I was free. You're a nurse, Donald said. You know how to care for elderly patients. Eugene needs his medication managed, his meals prepared, and some company. You're the best fit. I was planning to work holiday shifts, I explained. The holiday pay is time and a half, and I really need the income. Cancel them, Donald ordered. Family comes first. We'll be gone for 12 days. Paris, Zurich, Venice. It's all booked and non-refundable. You'll stay at the old house with Eugene. What about Todd? I asked. Todd is coming with us, Donald said simply. He deserves a break. He's been working very hard. I almost laughed. Todd held the title of Vice President of Operations at the auto parts company, a role Donald had given him. His actual job involved working 3 days a week and taking 2-hour lunches. If I say no, I asked. Donald's voice dropped. Then Eugene spends Christmas completely by himself. Is that what you want? To leave your grandfather all alone just because you're too selfish to help? My chest tightened. I'll think about it. There's nothing to think about, Donald snapped. Be there by the evening of December 23rd. Our flight leaves at noon. He hung up. The call lasted exactly 2 minutes and 38 seconds. I stood in the hospital corridor, staring at the wall. My charge nurse tapped the doorframe. Carmel, bed 3 needs you. I nodded and went back to work, but in my head, I was already doing the math. From Nashville to my grandfather's old house, in the suburbs of Memphis, was 212 miles, a 3.5-hour drive. I could refuse. I could stay. But if I did, I would be the bad guy who abandoned Eugene, and Donald would make sure everyone in the family knew about my supposed cold-heartedness. On December 23, 2024, I left Nashville at 3:20 in the afternoon. Traffic was light, as most holiday travelers had already reached their destinations. At 4:15, I called Donald. No answer. At 4:50, I called Carolyn. No answer. At 5:30, I called Todd. No answer. At 5:45, a text from Carolyn popped up. Boarding now. Eugene's food is in the fridge. Thanks for doing this. Merry Christmas. No apology for ignoring my calls. No guilt over forcing me to cancel 3 high-paying holiday night shifts. I kept driving. At 6:45, I pulled into the driveway of the old house. The place was pitch black, except for a single light burning in the living room. I parked, grabbed my duffel bag, and walked to the front door. It was unlocked. On the kitchen table sat a piece of paper. It was plain white printer paper with blue ink, written in Donald's hand. I picked it up. We went to Europe with your brother. You stay and look after grandfather. He needs you. No, please. No, thank you. No, we appreciate this. Just a cold demand. The handwriting was heavy and decisive, written without a trace of guilt. I folded the note, slipped it into my pocket, and heard a slow, rhythmic creaking sound from the living room. Eugene was sitting in his rocking chair. It had been in that exact corner for as long as I could remember. An oak frame with a faded green cushion. It creaked softly against the uneven wooden floor. Eugene looked up at me. He was 82, thin, with neatly combed gray hair, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans. His eyes were sharp and clear. Hello, Carmel, he said. I set my bag down. Hi, grandfather. A faint smile touched his lips. I see they left you a note. I nodded. They didn't ask you, did they? No. He nodded slowly, continuing to rock. Are we ready to begin? I frowned. Begin what? He didn't answer. He just smiled and closed his eyes. I stood there, completely confused, before taking my things upstairs to my old bedroom. The bed was made, but dust coated the nightstand. The room hadn't been touched in years. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what Eugene meant. At least, I didn't know yet. The next morning at 8:30, the smell of coffee woke me. I went downstairs to find Eugene in the kitchen. He had made oatmeal and scooped it into 2 bowls. Sit, he said. We ate in silence for 10 minutes. Then, Eugene looked up. Tell me about your patients, the ones you bring back. I paused my spoon. What do you mean? You work in the ICU, he said. You see people at their absolute worst, and you pull them back. Tell me about that. Usually, when people asked about my job, it was a polite, surface-level question. But Eugene wanted the details. So I told him about a 52-year-old man who had gone into cardiac arrest during my last shift. I told him how we performed chest compressions, how we used the defibrillator, and how his heart started beating again on the 4th shock. Eugene listened quietly. When I finished, he nodded. You're good at recognizing when someone is being manipulated, aren't you? I furrowed my brow. What? In your job, he said, you must see family members trying to control patients or make medical decisions for them for their own reasons. You recognize that behavior, right? Yes, I answered cautiously. We are trained to identify undue influence, coercion, and elder abuse. Eugene smiled. Good. He stood up and carried his bowl to the sink, leaving me sitting there, more confused than ever. On Christmas Day, at 11:20 in the morning, I called my family in Europe. No answer. At 6:15 in the evening, I tried again. Still no answer. I left a voicemail. Merry Christmas. Hope you're having fun. Give me a call when you can. They never called back. I made dinner for Eugene and myself. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. We ate at the small kitchen table, just the two of us. Eugene looked at me. They aren't going to call. I know, I said. That's all right, he murmured. We have work to do. I set my fork down. What work? He smiled. You'll see. After dinner, we sat in the living room. Tell me about Donald, Eugene said. I hesitated. What do you want to know? What was it like being his daughter? He looked at me with absolute openness, so I told him. I told him about the blatant favoritism, about Todd, about being forced to hand over $7,000 for Todd's down payment, and about Thanksgiving in 2023. Eugene listened, his chair rocking slowly. When I finished, he nodded. He offered you $18,000 to walk away from my estate, didn't he? Eugene asked. I stared at him. How do you know that? Because he called me first back in October, Eugene said. He wanted me to convince you to take the money. Said it would be better for everyone, less drama. My hands clenched into fists. What did you tell him? I refused, Eugene said. I told him that you are the only person in this family who treats me like a human being, rather than a walking bank account. I felt something break in my chest. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to see if you would hold your ground, Eugene explained. And you did. That told me everything I needed to know. He leaned forward. There is something I need you to do, but not yet. Wait until they get home. What is it? You'll know when the time comes, he said. He stood up and walked to the stairs, pausing. Carmel. I looked at him. Thank you for being here, he said, and then went up to bed. Sitting alone on the couch, for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. The next afternoon, Eugene and I were in the living room. He was reading, and I was scrolling through my phone. Suddenly, he set his book down. Donald thinks I have dementia, he said. I looked up. What? Your father, Eugene said. He thinks I've lost my mind. He thinks I'm feeble and easily manipulated. You aren't, I said. You're sharper than most people I know. Eugene laughed. I know. But Donald doesn't see that. He just sees an old man, a bank account with a heartbeat. He leaned back. I built a manufacturing business from nothing. Industrial parts. Started in 1980 and sold it in 2015 for $20 million. I stared at him. 20 million? Yes, he said. And I invested it. Stocks, bonds, real estate. It's grown over the years. Does Dad know? He knows I have money, Eugene said. But he doesn't know how much. He thinks it's around 2 or 3 million. Enough to fight over, but not enough to change their lives completely. He looked at me. He's been trying to get me to sign a new trust agreement. An agreement that appoints him as executor and gives him absolute control. Why? Because he wants to ensure Todd gets everything, Eugene said, and he wants to make sure you get nothing. My stomach turned. He's been isolating me, Eugene continued. Excluding me from family gatherings, keeping you from visiting, making excuses. He wants me vulnerable. That is elder abuse, I said softly. Eugene nodded. I know. And you know it too, because of your training. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. This is for you. Don't open it now. Wait until they get home. You'll know when to use it. I took the envelope. It was thick and heavy. What's inside? Evidence, he said, and power. He closed his eyes and began to rock. Holding that envelope in my hands, it felt like a shield. The next 3 days fell into a peaceful routine. On December 27th, we went for walks down the road. His pace was slow but steady, and we talked about the business he built over 35 years and the employees he cared about. I didn't make $20 million by being ruthless, he told me. I made it by being fair. On December 28th, I helped him organize his medications. He took 3 prescriptions daily at the exact same times. 8, 2, and 8. Never missed a dose. Discipline, he said. That's the secret to a long life. On December 29th, we sat on the porch in the 42-degree cold just to get some fresh air. I'm not afraid of dying, he remarked. I'm afraid of being forgotten, or worse, remembered incorrectly. What do you mean? Donald will tell people I was difficult, Eugene said. He'll say I was unfair. He'll rewrite history to make himself look like the victim. He turned to look at me. But you'll remember the truth, won't you? Yes, I said. Good, he murmured. That's enough. That night, Eugene handed me a second envelope. Inside this one are my medical records, cognitive assessments, and proof of my mental fitness. If anyone tries to claim I wasn't competent to make decisions, show them this. I took it. Who would claim that? Because they will try to challenge what is in the first envelope, he said. They'll say I was manipulated, that I was senile. But I know exactly who I am, clearer than I have in years. On December 30th, Eugene called me into the living room. He held a large, thick 9x12 manila envelope. This is the one, he said. Don't open it yet. Wait until they get home. I took it, feeling its weight. What is in here? Everything, he replied. Documents, emails, evidence, the truth. He sat back in his chair. When they return, there will be a family meeting. Donald will try to take control. He will accuse you of things and try to force my signature. What do I do? Just listen, he said. And when it's your turn to speak, show them what is in this envelope. He looked at me, his eyes entirely calm. Are we ready to begin? This time I understood. Yes, I said. He nodded. Good. Now we wait. I held the envelope tightly. It felt like an unstoppable force, but I didn't open it. Not yet. I would wait, just as he asked. On January 2nd, 2025, at 3:55 in the morning, the sound of a car engine woke me. I sat up and checked my phone. They weren't supposed to be back until noon on January 3rd. They were 20 hours early. I walked downstairs in my sweatpants. The front door opened, and Donald walked in first. He stopped when he saw me, his voice sharp with suspicion. Why are you awake? I heard the car, I said. You're early. Flights changed, Donald said quickly. We had to leave Venice early. His gaze darted past me to the living room, where Eugene sat in his rocking chair, eyes closed, rocking slowly, Donald's jaw clenched. Carolyn and Todd walked in, dropping their bags, and Donald stepped closer to me. What did Eugene tell you? I frowned. What? What did he tell you? Donald repeated, leaning in. Did he give you anything? We just talked. About what? Todd chimed in, his voice tense. His life, I said. His factory, his health, normal things. Donald narrowed his eyes. Did he mention his will? His estate? No, I lied. Donald turned to Eugene. Dad, did you talk to Carmel about your will? Eugene slowly opened his eyes and looked at his son. We talked about many things. What things? Donald pressed. Life, Eugene said. Death, family, the usual. Carolyn stepped forward. Eugene, we were worried about you. We feel like Carmel might have said things to influence you. I stared at her. Influence him? How? You've been alone with him for a week, Todd sneered. Who knows what you've been whispering in his ear? Anger flared in my chest, but I kept my voice entirely calm. I've been taking care of him, managing his meds, cooking, keeping him company, that's it. Donald's face flushed red. Where is the folder? Todd shot him a sharp look. Dad, shut up! Donald glared at Todd, and I looked between them. What folder? Nothing, Donald said quickly. We're having a family meeting tomorrow morning at 10. Everyone will be there. He turned to Eugene. We need to discuss your care and your estate. Eugene nodded. Of course. Donald stared back at me. You need to be there. It wasn't a request. I'll be there, I said. They went upstairs, and I heard doors shutting. I stood in the kitchen, my heart racing, as Eugene looked at me and smiled, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. At 4:12 in the morning, I was making coffee, my hands shaking. Todd walked down, his hair messy and eyes bloodshot. Where is the folder? He whispered. I turned. What folder? The one Dad asked about, Todd said. I don't know what you're talking about. Todd rubbed his face in frustration. Eugene has a folder. Legal documents. Dad wants it. He thinks Eugene might have given it to you. Why would he give it to me? Because you're the golden child now, aren't you? Todd snapped. I stared at him. What? Eugene used to talk about me, Todd said bitterly. About me running the business. But ever since you started visiting more, he changed. I visit twice a year, I countered. You live 20 minutes away. When was the last time you came by? Todd didn't answer. I poured my coffee. If Eugene has any documents, he didn't give them to me. Another lie. Todd turned and went back upstairs. I stood alone in the kitchen. The envelope was safe under my bed, and whatever was inside, they were desperate to find it. At 4:20, Donald came back downstairs, dressed in jeans and a button-down shirt. 10 o'clock, he said. Everyone in the living room. No excuses. Okay, I said. He pointed a finger at me. No tricks, Carmel. This is for Eugene's own good, not yours. I understand, I replied. He left the house and drove back to his place 10 miles away. Carolyn and Todd stayed behind, sleeping in the guest rooms. I went back to my room, pulled the manila envelope from under the bed, and sat on the floor. It was time. I tore open the seal. At 9 o'clock that morning, the house was quiet. Carolyn and Todd were still asleep. I sat on my bed, the documents spread across my lap. They were neatly organized with a binder clip. On top was a handwritten note in Eugene's handwriting. Carmel, if you're reading this, it means they are home, and it means you are ready. Everything you need is in this folder. When the time is right, show them. Trust yourself. Eugene. I set the note aside and pulled out the first document titled, The Last Will and Testament of Eugene Walter Wittenberg, dated December 15, 2024. I read the first page. I, Eugene Walter Wittenberg, being of sound mind and body, hereby revoke any and all prior wills and codicils. My heart hammered against my ribs as I turned the page. To my granddaughter, Carmel Williams, who has shown me unconditional kindness. I leave 85% of my estate. Estimated value, $17 million. I gasped, forgetting to breathe. $17 million. I kept reading. To St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. I leave 10% of my estate. Estimated value, $2 million. To my grandson, Todd Wittenberg, I leave 5% of my estate. On the condition that he completes a fiduciary financial management course and demonstrates financial responsibility. Estimated value, $1 million. I turn to the third page. To my son, Donald Wittenberg, and his wife, Carolyn Wittenberg, I leave nothing. They have demonstrated financial stability and do not require my assets. Furthermore, their attempts to isolate me from other family members and manipulate my estate planning demonstrate a lack of respect for my personal wishes. I read it again. Donald and Carolyn, $0. The reason? Suspected elder abuse. The will was signed by 2 witnesses and notarized by an attorney named Janet Kowalski on December 15, 2024. It was a completely legal, binding, and filed document. The next papers were powers of attorney, medical power of attorney, designating Carmel Williams as representative for all medical decisions if Eugene became incapacitated, dated December 15, 2024. Financial power of attorney, designating Carmel Williams to manage his finances if he became unable to do so, dated December 15, 2024. All notarized, all legally binding. I had full control. The very documents Donald had been trying to coax Eugene into signing had already been given to me. Below those were printouts of emails from Donald Wittenberg to Todd Wittenberg. Subject, Eugene. Keep Carmel away from Eugene. We need him to sign the new trust agreement before Christmas. She will ruin this. Once it's signed, we are secure. Make sure he doesn't talk to her. Date: December 5, 2024, from Todd Wittenberg to Donald Wittenberg. Subject, Eugene. How do we keep her away? She visits every few months. Reply from Donald. I'll handle it. I'll make sure she's too busy to visit, or I'll pay her to stay away. Date: December 10, 2024, from Donald Wittenberg to Todd Wittenberg. Subject, Europe trip. Europe trip booked. We leave December 23rd. I'm leaving Carmel to watch Eugene for 12 days. That should keep her occupied while we're out of the country. When we get back, we'll get him to sign. I read the emails 3 times. They weren't just greedy, they were plotting. And Eugene had known the entire time. The final document was a handwritten letter from Eugene. To whom it may concern, I am writing this to clarify my mental state and intentions. I am 82 years old, and I am of sound mind. I have been assessed by Dr. Patricia Hernandez, who confirmed I have no cognitive impairment. I have decided to leave the vast majority of my estate to my granddaughter, Carmel Williams, because she is the only member of my family who treats me with dignity and respect. Carmel visits because she wants to, not because she wants something from me. She listens when I speak and treats me like a person, not a bank account. My son, Donald, and grandson, Todd, have spent the last year attempting to isolate me from Carmel. They have pressured me to sign documents giving them control over my assets, showing that their interest in me is purely financial. I make this decision freely, without coercion, and with full understanding of the consequences. If anyone challenges this will, I request this letter be used as evidence of my true wishes. Sincerely, Eugene Walter Wittenberg. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. It was 10 o'clock. I was ready to face them. At 10 o'clock, the five of us gathered in the living room. Eugene sat in his rocking chair, eyes half closed, looking completely at peace. Donald sat at the head of the dining table, which had been moved to the center of the room. Carolyn sat on his right, hands clasped tightly, looking anxious. Todd sat opposite me, arms crossed and jaw clenched. I sat at the end of the table with the manila envelope resting on my lap. Donald cleared his throat. We're here today to discuss Eugene's care and his estate planning. He looked at Eugene. Dad, you're getting older. We need to make sure you're protected and that your wishes are carried out clearly. Eugene kept his eyes closed, rocking slowly. Donald pulled a folder from his briefcase and laid it on the table. I've prepared a revised trust agreement, he said. It names me as executor to ensure your assets are managed properly and end up in the right hands. He slid the document toward Eugene. You just need to sign here. Eugene didn't move. Donald softened his voice, turning on a fake tone of concern. Dad, Carmel spent a week alone with you. We don't know what she said, but we want to make sure you weren't unfairly influenced. He looked at me. Carmel, we appreciate you watching him, but we are worried you might have put pressure on him. I kept my expression blank. Pressure? How? You're a nurse, Donald said bluntly. You know how to talk to elderly patients, how to earn their trust, and how to manipulate them. Carolyn nodded in agreement. We aren't accusing you of anything, Carmel. We're just concerned. Todd leaned forward. Grandfather, did Carmel say bad things about us? Did she tell you lies? Eugene opened his eyes and looked at Todd. What lies would she tell? Lies about us. Todd raised his voice. About how we treat you, about this family. Donald stood up and began to pace. Dad, you have to understand. Carmel has her own life and career. She doesn't have time for this family. Todd and I are the ones who stay here, run the business, and look after you. You haven't visited me in 8 months, Eugene said quietly, cutting him off. Donald froze. 8 months, Eugene repeated. The last time you stepped into this house was last April. You stayed for less than 20 minutes, asked if I needed anything, and left. Todd shifted uncomfortably in his seat. That's not fair, Carolyn protested. We've been busy with the business. Carmel works 60 hours a week, Eugene said, looking at them. But she still drives 3.5 hours to see me every 2 months. Donald's face flushed deep red. This isn't about who visits more. This is about your estate and your care. We need to make sure you get my money. Eugene finished for him. A dead silence fell over the room. Todd slammed his hand on the table. This is exactly what I was talking about. She's been brainwashing you, turning you against us. He pulled a printed article from his pocket and threw it on the table. The headline read, Financial Abuse of the Elderly by Caregivers. Healthcare workers taking advantage of vulnerable seniors. Todd read aloud. It's a crime, he glared at me. You fit this profile perfectly, Carmel. You have the access, and you have the medical knowledge. You're trying to turn grandfather against his own blood. I didn't say a word. Carolyn wiped away a tear. Carmel, how could you do this? We trusted you. Donald pointed a finger at me, clenching his teeth. You won't get away with this. We'll fight it. We'll hire the best lawyers and prove you exerted undue influence over him. I looked at Eugene and he gave me a slight nod. It was time. Donald opened his folder. Dad, this is the trust agreement we discussed in November, before Carmel got involved. It divides the estate fairly. 50% to me, 40% to Todd, and 10% to Carmel. He pushed a pen and the paper toward Eugene. You need to sign this today. Eugene looked at the document without touching it. When did we discuss this? In November, Donald said. You agreed it was fair. I never agreed to that, Eugene said. You did. Donald's voice rose. You said. I said I would think about it, Eugene interrupted. And I did. The answer is no. Donald's hands began to shake. Dad, you're confused. You aren't thinking clearly. That's why we have to handle this now, before you. Before I what? Eugene asked. Before I realize you're trying to take what isn't yours. Todd stood up. We aren't taking anything, we're family. Eugene looked at him coldly. Family doesn't isolate people. Family doesn't plot behind closed doors. He turned to me. Carmel, it's your turn. I stood up, placed the manila folder on the table, and pulled my hands back. Donald stared at it. What is that? Evidence, I said calmly. He reached for it, but I pulled it back. I'll present it, I said, not you. Carolyn looked at Donald in panic. What is going on? Before anyone signs anything, Eugene said, I want to hear what Carmel has to say. Donald opened his mouth. Dad, this is completely. Sit down, Donald, Eugene commanded, his voice carrying an absolute authority that brooked no argument. Donald gritted his teeth and sat back down. Eugene looked at me. Go ahead. I opened the folder, standing tall at the end of the table. My voice was calm, professional, and completely objective. The exact same tone I used when delivering a patient update to a chief resident in the ICU. I am a registered nurse with 6 years of experience in the ICU, I began, looking at each of them. I am trained to assess mental capacity, identify coercion, and recognize signs of elder abuse. I locked eyes with Donald. So, let me make this very clear. Eugene Wittenberg is in full possession of his mental faculties. Donald opened his mouth to protest, but I raised a hand, stopping him cold. I'm not finished, I said. He fell silent. For the past 7 days, I continued, I have kept a close eye on Eugene's health. He is fully aware of who he is, where he is, and what is happening around him. He manages his medications perfectly. His reasoning is sharp, and he is entirely capable of making his own decisions. There is absolutely no sign of confusion, memory loss, or cognitive decline. I pulled out the first document, his medical log and daily evaluation. Here is his medication sheet, showing perfect compliance. And here is his cognitive report. On December 20th, Dr. Patricia Hernandez administered a mental status exam, and Eugene scored a perfect 30 out of 30. I slid the papers across the table. So when you claim he is fragile, confused, or unfit, I said, looking straight at Donald. You are lying, Carolyn gasped, and Todd's face went entirely pale. I pulled out the stack of printed emails. Let's look at Exhibit A, I said. Email correspondence between Donald Wittenberg and Todd Wittenberg from November and December. I read the first one aloud, keeping my voice flat and professional. Date, time, sender, subject. November 28th at 11:35 at night. From Donald to Todd. Quote, keep Carmel away from Eugene. Quote, we need him to sign the new trust agreement before Christmas. Quote, she will ruin this. I handed the page to Eugene, who glanced at it and nodded. Todd jumped out of his chair, sweat bead on his forehead. That is out of context! Sit down, I snapped. He sank back into his chair, stunned. I read the second email, December 5th. Quote, how do we keep her away? Donald's reply, I'll handle it. I'll make sure she's too busy to visit. Or I'll pay her to stay away. I looked up, locking eyes with Donald. You called me on October 24th at 10:30 at night, offering me $18,000 to sign away my inheritance. I recorded that call. Donald's jaw dropped. You recorded it? Tennessee is a one-party consent state, I said, stating the law clearly. I am legally allowed to record any conversation I participate in, with or without your permission. I pulled out the third email. December 10th. Quote, Europe trip booked. We leave December 23rd. I'm leaving Carmel to watch Eugene for 12 days. That should keep her occupied while we're out of the country. I slammed the emails on the table. You didn't leave me here to care for Eugene. You left me here to keep me isolated so I wouldn't talk to his lawyer or discover what you were planning. Carolyn began to weep. Carmel, please. I'm not finished, I said, cutting her off. I pulled out the next document, Exhibit B, a comprehensive medical evaluation from Dr. Patricia Hernandez, a board-certified specialist in geriatrics. I read the conclusion. Patient Eugene Wittenberg, 82, is in excellent cognitive health and possesses full decision-making capacity. Recommendation. The patient is entirely capable of making his own medical, financial, and legal decisions. I pushed the report toward Donald. Your father doesn't have dementia. He isn't confused. He is sharper than you are. Todd slammed his fist on the table. You fabricated this. You're manipulating him. If I were manipulating him, I replied, I wouldn't have a certified report from an independent physician. If you want to accuse me of undue influence, go ahead. But you will lose everything in court because this medical evidence is bulletproof. I pulled out the bank statements, investment portfolios, and property deeds. Exhibit C, I said, laying them out. Eugene's financial records, total assets, $20 million. Donald stared at the papers, completely speechless. You thought I didn't know, didn't you? I said. Let me break it down for you. $8 million in stocks, $6 million in bonds, $4 million in real estate, and $2 million in cash and savings. Todd stared at the numbers, his voice trembling. 20 million? Yes, I said. And not a single cent of it belongs to either of you. Donald stood up, his face contorted. Where did you get this? Eugene gave it to me, I said, meeting his gaze. Because unlike you, I didn't treat him like an account to be drained. I treated him like a person. Carolyn reached to grab the files, but I pulled them away. These are just copies, I said. The originals are with Eugene's attorney, Janet Kowalski, and they were officially filed on December 16th. Donald's face turned deep red. You can't do this! It's already done, I said. Just then, Eugene stood up. It was the first time he had stood during the entire meeting, and Carolyn gasped. He walked to the center of the room with slow, deliberate steps. I do not have dementia, Eugene said, his voice carrying clearly across the room. I am not confused. I have made my decision. He looked at Donald. You tried to isolate me. You tried to manipulate me. To you, I was just a chore to be managed, not a father to be loved. He turned to Carolyn. And you went along with it. When he pushed Carmel away, when he treated her like garbage, you sat by and did nothing. You were an accomplice. Finally, he looked at Todd. And you followed right in his footsteps. You took your sister's hard-earned money without a single thank you, believing that just because you are a man, you are entitled to everything. Todd slumped in his chair, completely deflated. Eugene walked to the dining table, picked up the trust agreement Donald had brought, and tore it right down the middle, throwing the pieces on the table. I will never sign this, Eugene said. I have already made my final will. It was filed on December 16th. It is legal, valid, and permanent. He looked at me and nodded. I placed the actual will on the table. Carmel will inherit 85% of my estate, Eugene announced. $17 million. Carolyn let out a sharp cry as the room erupted. You can't do this, she screamed, standing up. We are your family. Donald snatched the will, his hands shaking violently as he scanned the first page. This is madness, he yelled. She brainwashed you. We will fight this in court, we will. Keep reading, Eugene said calmly. Donald flipped to the next page, and all the color left his face. Donald Wittenberg and Carolyn Wittenberg will receive nothing, Donald read, his voice shaking, due to their attempts to isolate the testator and manipulate estate planning, demonstrating a lack of respect for his personal wishes. Prodrigen, he looked up in disbelief. You cut us out completely? Yes, Eugene said. Carolyn sank into her chair, crying hysterically. Todd jumped up, pacing the room. What about me? What do I get? 5%, Eugene said. $1 million, with conditions. What conditions? Todd demanded. The condition that you complete a financial management course, Eugene said, and prove to the executor that you can handle money responsibly. If you can't learn to manage it, you won't get a single cent. Todd's face twisted in anger. You're making me jump through hoops for $1 million, while she gets $17 million for doing nothing? She didn't do nothing, Eugene said firmly. She saw me. She listened to me. She cared. He pointed a finger at Todd. You live 20 minutes away and didn't visit me once in 8 months. Carmel drove 212 miles to see me every 2 months. Who deserves my trust? Todd remained silent. Donald slammed the will onto the table. We're suing! We'll prove undue influence. Go ahead, I said, standing up. You'll lose. I walked to the center of the room, my voice steady and cold. Under Tennessee law, I am a mandated reporter. Under state code, elder abuse and financial exploitation are serious offenses. I have documented everything. Every call, every email, every attempt to pressure Eugene or isolate me. I have a complete file. I showed them my phone. I have recordings, timestamps, and witnesses. If you challenge this will, I said, stepping closer to Donald, I will immediately file a report with Adult Protective Services and hand over all my evidence. You could face criminal charges, Donald. Carolyn let out a quiet sob. Furthermore, I said, turning to Todd, if you participate in a lawsuit, You will immediately lose your inheritance. The will contains a strict no contest clause. Anyone who challenges it automatically forfeits their share. Are you willing to risk $1 million to chase money you don't deserve? Todd sat back down, completely defeated. I looked at Eugene. Do you have anything to add? He smiled. I think you covered everything perfectly. The room fell into a heavy silence. I picked up my bag and waited for 10 seconds. Nobody moved. Then, Donald snapped. You did this! You filled his head with poison! He screamed. You spent a week brainwashing him. This is manipulation. Carolyn joined in, calling me an opportunist, while Todd threatened to see me in court. Their voices overlapped as they hurled accusations, but I just stood there, quiet and unmoved. Eugene raised his hand, and the room silenced instantly. My decision is final, Eugene said. The will is filed with my attorney. It is witnessed, notarized, and entirely legal. If you sue, you will lose, and you will destroy what little family connection we have left. He looked at Todd. And you will lose your share. Do you understand? Todd nodded slowly. Finally, Eugene looked at Carolyn. I gave you 32 years. When Donald mistreated Carmel, you chose his side. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. Carolyn covered her face, sobbing. Eugene walked back to his rocking chair, sat down, and closed his eyes. This meeting is over, he said. I put my bag over my shoulder and walked toward the door. Donald stepped in front of me, blocking the exit. You ruined this family, he muttered through his teeth. I looked at him with utter disdain. I didn't ruin this family, Donald. You did. You ruined it the moment you decided Todd's name was worth more than my hard work. You ruined it when you tried to buy me out for $18,000, and when you tried to isolate Eugene just to take his money. Don't play the victim here. Donald's jaw clenched. You'll regret this. No, I said. You will. I pushed past him and opened the door.